pase, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today for Wednesday, May 16th, 2018. Joining us on the line today to talk about Real Salt Lake. It's our Real Salt Lake check-in from the Crossbar RSL. Matthew Montgomery. Matthew, good morning.
Matthew, as I said, we're going to do a little bit of around the league over the next little while, checking into various places. We are going to get going today with RSL, and we'll just ask you a general question off the top. About a third of the way into this season now, what are your feelings on RSL's performance thus far?
It's funny. We're talking with someone who follows Montreal Impact, right? And we've been kind of similar to them. We have a pretty poor goal differential. We've drawn only one game and won only 4 games, leaving us with 5 games lost in like 10 games.
Yeah.
And generally, we've just been kind of miserable at times and really exciting at other times. But then as I look around the Western Conference, we're very similar to like Vancouver and Minnesota, and not too different from Houston, and probably better than LA. And then I realized I have no idea what's going on in the Western Conference, let alone what's happening at Real Salt Lake.
The West is a bit of a mess this year, but I think what thing really jumps out when you look at RSL is that goals against figure, 2.1 goals against per game right now. That is the worst in the West. What has been the problem at the back?
So, excuse me. I've been a big believer in Mike Petke over the last year. But he has shown a somewhat startling tendency to stick with his guys, and that's led to a situation where we have playing at fullback 2 like definitively non-fullback players. We've got Brooks Lennon, who's played at striker more than he's played as in the midfield. He played for Liverpool's U23s at right wing and striker. And we've got him there playing right back, and he hasn't been terrible necessarily, but he's been pretty bad. On the left side, we've had Paulo Ruiz, who is similarly not a defender, and so we've had this tendency to just sort of play guys that can play there, but should they play there? I don't know. I think that's been one of the things that stood out to me. Now, some of that, of course, has been injury enforced, and that's been something that's made our season a little more difficult. We've lost Tony Beltran for most of the season. We've brought in Adam Henley, who could be a great right back, but we have sort of needed to transition into the league. And work back to full fitness. We've brought in other players who have taken to injury, and it does make things difficult.
When we're looking at RSL this season, 4-5-1 overall, we're looking at a team that a year ago, 3 games in, decided to make a big move and fire their coach at the time, Jeff Cassar, and hire Mike Petke. When we're looking at the last year, you mentioned that you did see some growth, and we did see a spur last year late in the season. But this season again, the beginning of the season was a bit of a shamble, not consistent results. And yes, it's a plague that's pretty much running rampant in the Western Conference. I think it's a virus that has been caught by multiple teams, like you mentioned, Vancouver's and company. What is the solution to get out of that quote unquote plague? How can you get consistent wins, which 2-3 consistent win is enough in the Western Conference right now to put yourself back into a better position, but still 6 right now, RSL 13 points. They are looking at a playoff spot if the playoff were to start this afternoon.
Yeah, I don't know what the solution is. I think for one, we've got to figure our squad out. We have a couple players that we've brought in that just haven't made the jump yet. We've got Alfredo Ortuño, who's our highest paid player, sitting on over $1 million guaranteed a year. Now, in comparison to other teams, $1 million a year is not anything to really shout at, right? This isn't like your top tier player. It's certainly not a Giovinco. And I don't think anybody expects that of him. But at the same time, he has played, I think, 100-ish minutes across 10 games. And for the majority of those, he's been fit. And it's to the point now that we have a rookie forward starting at forward over him. And he hasn't reliably made the bench, either at home or away. And so that he alone isn't the solution. And in fact, the player that's replaced him, Corey Baird, has done, I think, quite well, about as well as you could expect any rookie to do. But by the same token, it's difficult when you have $1 million in player not making an impact on the team. And there's just a misbalance there that I think we need to figure out if we're going to string together more than 1 or 2 wins at a time.
Right now, Major League Soccer is a league in growth, in constant growth. We're looking at a lot of money invested, especially in the depth of teams right now with TAM and GAM, the general and targeted allocation money, of course, the designated player spot as well. And we have stars coming to the league, players Carlos Vela, Diego Rossi. There's tons. Wayne Rooney probably coming to DC United or a stadium near you. The question is, Real Salt Lake has been known to be more of a 2.0 type of Major League Soccer franchise. Yes, the stadium, the Riot, is adequate for now, and the squad, but does it have the necessary growth vision and ambition that this league seems to need to achieve results now? If you look at the Toronto FCs, without a salary roster money with over $50 million, close to 20, it wouldn't be possible. What is the short-term and maybe long-term future of Real Salt Lake in at least the results, and will it need that injection of money?
You know, that's excuse me, it's difficult for me to really say right now. We've always tried to be that kind of plucky underdog that will come in and underperform a little bit, but really overperform people's expectations. And that's the team we were under Jason Kreis for 2008 to 2013, when we really hit our stride. So I think the team sees an opportunity to do that again. We have an owner in Deloy Hansen who has shown a real willingness to invest in the team. He's pumped money into this state-of-the-art training academy that could make a real impact on the long-term future of Real Salt Lake. But as it stands right now, we've yet to see that vision entirely executed. Now, part of that vision, I think, involves bringing in young players and selling them and using that money to benefit the squad. So, say a Justin Glad, who could go to Europe and we could make a hefty little sum for. But it hasn't happened yet. And I think we'll see those things happen, but we're not at a point yet where they do. And I think that's the sort of return on investment in this long-term growth project that we need to see if we're going to keep up. Because I think realistically, players are not going to say, oh, Salt Lake City is my dream job. Like, I will leave X top team in Europe because I really want to play in Utah. I think that realistically that'll happen for like 1 in a million players. And that, like, 1 in a million players is my favorite player of all time, I'm sure. But we've got to have plans that aren't just that.
Fair enough. In terms of the type of player you do attract, one player that you'd have spent a little bit of money on is a player familiar to fans in the city I'm in Toronto, and Joel Plata. I'm just wondering, I've always wondered whether he's the type of player you can really build around, whether you feel that he's living up to the contract that he's gotten there.
Yeah, I think for a long time we wanted him to be the sort of player we could build around. But I don't think he is. We've seen too many times just little attitude problems, little spats with the coach, regardless of who the coach is. Just little attitude things leaking out. And that, you can support a player like that just fine on a team, but you can't really build around them. And I think we've seen that over the last year, that the team has said, like, yes, Joel Plata is an important piece on this team, but he's not the player we're gonna shape our identity around. And I think when they tried to do that, it kind of backfired. Now, he hasn't having the most productive season so far, and there have been rumblings, I think, for the past year and a half that a move to Mexico is on the cards. We'll see if that sort of thing happens. I think it's a fairly natural progression for him, but there are a lot of question marks there.
Yeah, well, I'll remind listeners that Joel Plata literally walked out on TFC. I like to remind people of that. He left without telling them he was leaving, so the attitude problems go way back, not to rub salt in the wound out there. But another player I want to talk about, this might be a more difficult player to sometimes criticize, because you mentioned, building an identity around a single player, and there is a player in Carl Beckerman that I do think RSL for a long time has been associated with. He was RSL in a lot of people's minds. Those big dreads in the midfield were something that we're all, associating with that club. He's on the wrong side of his career right now for sure. I'm wondering whether you still feel, and he's right up there, 900 minutes played. He's been on the pitch the entire season. Whether or not you feel that he is still a player that should be, penned into the lineup starter every minute of every game.
Yeah, I think that's a live question right now. I think if we can develop a tactical identity that works with him as a player that isn't running for 90 minutes, and of course he's not the player that's going to run the most on the team, and he never has been, but he has been a very active player in his career. And that will change necessarily as this progresses. But I think if we can get the most out of him, we've got a player in, say, Damir Kreilach, who can play that role ahead of him and protect him a little bit, and allow him to really shield the back line. We've had some problems with him and Kreilach really getting their communication right, getting their spacing right. But I think we're starting to see that come to fruition, where Kreilach will maybe play a little higher up, and Beckerman can play that destroyer role that isn't going to chase a player down. He's just going to slide into him, protect his back line, and I think, and I'm not certain on this, that could work in the short to medium term. Whether that can last all season, I don't know. I think we would be stupid to not look at enhancing that midfield. But we certainly don't have a player behind Kyle Beckerman that could play his role even half as well as he does, even with his age, being out there in neon lights.
Now, Real Salt Lake, what are we expecting, and maybe should we anticipate in the next few weeks? Is there a ceiling of performance? Is there maybe a bottom of we should expect? We all know that unfortunately there's a few terrible teams like Seattle that have maybe what it takes to slowly eke back that table. If we want to make sure Seattle stays there, how should we anticipate their performances, their play in the next few weeks?
Yeah, I think we've seen signs that they're on the right track, that they are figuring out some of these tactical problems. Petke, of course, is not, famously not the most tactical coach. He is a man motivator, and he sort of relies, I think, on the people around him to establish that tactical identity outside of maybe his bitiness and his desire to really get into it. I think we've seen a Real Salt Lake team that can attack with the best of them. We can be extremely dangerous and score at any time. But we've also seen a team that can't defend for their lives. So one of those things will change and will shift to one side or the other, good or bad. And I honestly, I wouldn't make predictions now because it feels like we're in this very nebulous middle ground.
I know this is not necessarily soccer related, but of course in the last few weeks we have seen the Jazz have a successful run in the playoffs, and have seen with the great support and great atmosphere and energy in the city. What would it take for Real Salt Lake to have that buzz in Salt Lake City, to have the riot filled to the brinks, and maybe a buzz that grows to the mainstream in Salt Lake and not just a soccer bubble? That's what I'm wondering, is how do they break through to gather that momentum that the Jazz has? How can you parlay both?
Yeah, so there's an interesting corollary between the Jazz and Real Salt Lake. And I see that as primarily like they're two teams that both overperformed for a time. Real Salt Lake won a championship. Of course, the Jazz came close twice. Tragically, it hurts me to say.
Stockton and Malone. Anyways.
They were fantastic days. And they got back to, that sort of buzz, not those performances yet, but that sort of buzz by bringing in a player that really, several players, I would say, that really delighted fans. We've got Rudy Gobert, who has become a huge fan favorite, right? And we've got, and somehow his name escapes me, young...
Yes. Gay? No, Rudy Gay? No, that's another one. Anyways.
We've got our fantastic young rookie in Donovan Mitchell, and somehow I forgot his name, so don't tell anyone in Utah that.
No worries.
Who has been electrifying. And so we saw, in 2009 with Real Salt Lake, that same sort of dominance and buzz. And that continued, I think, until 2011, dropped off a little in 2012, and returned again in 2013 with that famous run to the MLS Cup that saw us fall after the 10th penalty taken, or 11th penalty taken. So the key, I think, to getting that buzz, because I think Salt Lake City is very receptive to that sort of thing, is overperforming expectations, but doing it with personalities that people can identify with. And with Beckerman and Raimondo, that's what we had for a long time. Of course, they're still around. They'll still make an impact there. But we've got to see some of these players really, embrace the culture here, and we've got to see the culture here embrace the players. And it's not that Real Salt Lake fans are actively rejecting anybody. It's more, I think, that there's just that not that natural affinity, I guess, toward every Real Salt Lake player. And once we get a squad of 11 players that our fans can really get behind, I think we'll see the buzz in the city really pick up.
Matthew Montgomery of the Crossbar RSL. You can follow him on social media at the Crossbar RSL. Thank you very much, Matthew. And where can the listener read your work?
So they can read my work, as sparse as it may be, at rslsoapbox.com. Importantly, they can read the work of a lot of great writers there. So I'm just happy to help them get their voices heard.
Thank you very much for your time today.
Hey, thank you.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Duane Rollins with myself, Kevin Laramee. Duane, today, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Pacific. It's the Europa League final. Olympique de Marseille, Atletico Madrid. Is it Tony the Grizz? Is it the Grizz's last game with Madrid.
Probably, yeah. Although you never know. Atleti has a history of players leaving and then coming back again. There's a loyalty that is sort of associated with that club.
El Nino,
Yes.
Diego Costa, to name a few.
Yeah, exactly. There's the loyalty to that club. That club is very sort of community oriented, so I do think that they sort of inspire that kind of behavior in players. But they're also a selling club, even though they're a very successful club. And this latest era of Atleti has been their most successful and the era with the most stability in the roster. But for years, this was a club that would constantly produce players and then sell them on, and even see some of their players go to rivals of them within La Liga. So this is certainly, quite possible that Griezmann will likely be playing his final game and be looking to go out with a trophy. Diego Simeone is Atleti, right? He epitomizes that club in a way that few managers do. The closest comparison, Wenger at Arsenal for years, obviously leaving now, and Alex Ferguson jumped to mind. Like, there are very few managers that have that same kind of, like, he is Atleti, right? And they're going to play that way. They're going to play tough, and they're going to play rugged, and they're going to be able to work within that system and succeed year after year after year, despite the fact that they lose players of Griezmann's talent, and then they find new ones. That is the Atleti way. They are a huge favorite today, despite the fact that the game will be very close to Marseille. We played in Lyon. I'm looking forward to this one.
Me too, and I'm looking forward to this one for the Marseille side as well. Dimitri Payet. Yes, he's one of my favorite players. Yes, of course, I do love myself some free kick. And when you watch Dimitri Payet, it's always an option. It's always a possibility that he curls one around someone's head and ends up in the back of the net. So I like that part. I like the aspect, too, that it is relevant to the next few weeks, because the French national team, of course, on one side, you have Antoine Griezmann, who's probably going to be the top striker for France. The squad was announced yesterday, too. Good job, my man Giroud. Good job, Giroud. Woohoo! Anyways, I only can say that I like him now because he's a Chelsea player. I couldn't say anything about him before because he was with Arsenal, so I couldn't really be out and open the fact that I kind of like the guy. But now I kind of be open to, I like the guy. But for the French national team, this game in particular is kind of fascinating to gauge the level of a few players like Payet, Griezmann, and great players from Marseille side that are in the roster. So it will be interesting for me to gauge a bit of the French national team side to see this game and extrapolate on Griezmann and Payet and company.
Yeah.
And by saying company, I don't mean Victor.
Trying to break it down. As I said, Atleti is the faraway favorite. This is a team that has a lot of success in Europe. The only little blip they really had over the past 5 years or so was in that group stage where they did end up dropping down. And when they dropped down, I believe you can go back in our archives, and we were hardly original in saying this, there's your favorite to win this whole competition right now. Yeah. And I think that they probably defeated the second most talented team in the semifinals in Arsenal. And that would be maybe the one thing that they need to watch out for today. But this is, as I said, this is not a team that ever lets up. You don't ever anticipate that they're going to take an opponent for granted, and I don't expect that they will. No Simeone team is going to do that. Clash of styles in many ways. Marseille is kind of a more of an attacking-based lineup that they have to put out there. They play with wingers. They play fast, sort of overlapping, fullbacks up, some kind of soccer. Against the traditional 4-4-2, I'm going to kick you if I can't kick the ball kind of style that Atleti is famous for, and have narrowly almost won them a couple Champions Leagues. So they were seconds away from winning the Champions League, which would have been an incredible accomplishment there. A bit of a throwback for me on a personal level. I do have a soft spot for Atleti, always have, based on a trip to Madrid that I took several years ago that happened to coincide with Atleti's last Europa League championship. So I will have fond memories watching this one today of watching the Europa League final in Madrid with Atleti fans and becoming, I wouldn't say a supporter, but a fan, a friendly fan of that club at that point. So I'll be cheering for the Spanish side today. But it's interesting to watch a Ligue 1 team in a European final. It's been a long time since we've seen that.
So it's been 20 years, over 20 years since Marseille did the exact same thing in the early 90s. Was it 94? Around that time. Remember the Didier Deschamps team, Marseille. And,
European Cup.
it was, exactly. European Cup.
big one.
It was the big one. It's true. It's true because they did talk about in those Europa League magazine weekly show on TSN. They talked about how no French team has ever won the Europa League. True, but they did win the Champions League, so it's kind of like a moot point. But anyways.
Yeah, no, they're aiming to be the first French team to win the Europa League. As I said, interesting coincidence that it is in France. I don't know how much of a home advantage that will give them. It's not their stadium, obviously.
Yeah, but it's only 300 kilometers, so it's still kind of the south of France, because France is huge, right? France is talking about one of the big countries in Europe, geographically speaking, like land size. And you're looking at just 300 kilometers from Marseille to Lyon. So, but the one caveat is Griezmann is about 30 kilometers from there. So his whole family, his whole entire childhood friends and everything are going to be there in the stadium. But I do have a little soft spot for Marseille for me, Duane, because, you talked about Atleti. I remember when I was, 10, 11, 12, the amount of people I've seen with those, those white shorts with the 3 brands on the side, crooked, Adidas, the famous Olympic Marseille kit. I've seen this kit so much when I was a kid. I was like, wow, what's that team? And it was one of those brands. Of course, in the beginning of mobile phone, you had an Olympic Marseille video game that you just shoot like balls and just swipes. But it was Allez l'OM or something. But it got me like one of the first teams that I actually discovered through different means, through gaming, through clothing. We're not exposed to soccer games on television in 1994, but through other means I was exposed to Olympique de Marseille, and it is probably the French team that resonates the most to me, with the attitude as well and how they have built their club, the franchise, the history, the amount of great superstars that went there, the type of player that went there, Didier Drogba and company. So no, of course, it has a little soft spot for me. So I think I'm gonna cheer for the OM today, for l'OM.
It's nice to see a Ligue 1 team that isn't PSG get a little bit of attention too. It is a fun league to watch. I don't watch as much of it as I'd like, and that's a time thing more than anything else. I have access to it, so there's no excuse other than that, and it usually is my last choice. But when you do end up watching a game, it has a pace to it, a sort of style to it that's really it's accessible. It's something that resonates, right? And I don't have a team in Ligue 1. I don't have any French team with any affiliation or affection in any great way. So when I do watch those games, I do enjoy seeing them. As I said, this will be an interesting clash of styles. We mentioned the home 300 kilometers. You expect there'll be a large Marseille contingent there. Atleti they travel in numbers too, and anyone's going to travel to a European final, so it should be a good atmosphere, and it should be a fun time, a fun game. The Europa League I love the Europa League. We don't talk about it a lot because there are 7 million teams in it, and a lot of them are teams that we don't know that well. So for us to give it more attention would require a hell of a lot more Patreons, is what it would require. So It's a full-time job. But yeah, when it gets down to the end, it's this. I always find that the Europa League final is sometimes it's a better game than the Champions League final often, because I think that there's teams that want to win it. It's European silverware. It has the Champions League spot attached to it. But I think it also there's a looseness to it because it isn't the big dance. It is the sideshow, but it's a fun sideshow, and I will defend the Europa League in to my death. It is a fun competition, and it is always a fun final, and it should be a good one today. If you're, can get off work or you can get a screen going in the background, I highly recommend this one. It should be fun.
Even your DVR kind of cuts it. Just don't open Twitter. Just let your phone down, turn it over, record it. When you come home, just open your TV, get yourself some water, because what's good for you. Let's hydrate yourself. It's starting to be warm out there, and just listen to a great game. That's what I'm going to do today, Duane, because I have to go to the dentist at 2 p.m. So no live fun for me.
This is one that you probably can get away with in this part of the world. As long as you don't have a soccer-heavy social media, you're probably going to be fine to escape the score. It's not like they're going to be screaming it from the rooftops.
It's not like you're going to be walking down the street and someone's going to stop you and be like, "Oh, Ala Madrid, yeah, we won." No, it's the Europa League. It's not the Champions League.
I know where to find. If you're in Toronto, and you want to watch it with fans, the Scallywags, the infamous Scallywags, Young and St. Clair does have an Atleti supporters group that goes there sometimes. So I suspect that they will be filling that spot up today. I'm not too sure on Marseille, but that is always a good default place to go. I'm not too sure if there's any recommendations in Montreal that you can throw out there, but
there's a few French bar. Of course, Le Barouf is going to be rocking this afternoon, and if you go to other places as well where they show games, Central Bergame, which is a kind of like a fast food joint that does do FIFA sponsored places, does show games, and this does bring out the crowd, but it's a Wednesday, so we'll see, and we'll see again for tomorrow's show, live at 10 a.m. probably. Follow us on social media at Soccer Today SPN for the show. Duane at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. We'll be back, and the next episode of the Two Solid Two Soccer Podcast, I'm guaranteeing it this time. It's coming out just in a few hours. And as always, until next time, I'm Kevin Laramee for Duane Rollins. Have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.